Behind me is the Occipital office. It's a unique brick wall on one end. You remember we were here last year, about a month earlier, beginning of January before CES, and they showed us something very special then. So we're actually going to get a live demo a little bit later of how they pulled off their new mixed reality. And to give you an idea, I'll probably lead it off with the video a little bit later, but we also have another really fun, I guess, somebody that I met in the Google Cardboard developer who's been around in VR for a while, and that is Bernie. I've forgotten his last name. Bernie, what is your last name? Raul?
You can just call me Bernie, that's fine. My last name is Roehl, R-O-E-H-L.
Oh, I apologize. Oh, look, he's got an Oculus Connect T-shirt on there. But, you know, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is it's great to have people on who've been in this industry for a long time. And as you know, VR has kind of finally reached a point where it's become a consumer topic. And so for us old-timers, it's kind of amazing where we're at and where we're going. And again, it's like technology progresses, and it's now at a point that we can actually do something realistic at a reasonable price. So on to that note, I'm going to ask you, we already know your name, so where do you live? And what do you do?
I live in Waterloo, Ontario, Canada. So I'm about an hour west of a city called Toronto, which is one of our major cities. And I've lived here for many, many, many years, based at the University of Waterloo.
So, you know, you have a T-shirt on there, but I know that you go back a little bit further than just Oculus.
Yes, I almost wore my VRML 97 T-shirt, but I couldn't find it, so I put this one instead.
97.
97. Actually, I was doing it long before then. I was involved back in 1993, believe it or not. So, yeah, I'm definitely one of the, as they say, graybeards who are still kicking around and doing stuff.
So I'm assuming you know of Skip Rizzo, correct? You've heard of him?
I know of him. I don't know him personally.
Okay. Well, we did an interview with him, and I'd actually had talked to him before when we were doing our video gaming addiction seminars about the positives of video gaming, and what he's done is obviously a lot in VR and PTSD. So if you ever want to go out there, there is an interview, and it's a great interview. But he's been around in it a long time as well, so he's another old-timer, as they would say.
One thing I noticed is a lot of people from the old days are still around. I mean, we were that passionate about it 20 years ago, 25 years ago, that that passion doesn't leave you. You know, you want to see this stuff happen, and so we're all still around, still fighting the good fight, and all really excited to see what's happening right now.
Okay, so if you notice, well, actually we've got my camera on you, Bernie, but when I come back to me, I've got a little inset picture. They're actually setting up the shot, so so I may jump back and forth so you can see how they're progressing with it. And, you know, Bernie, with your expertise, you can probably give us a little bit of tips or your insight on what's going on as well. But what was your motivation? I mean, obviously, mine is because I love tech, got involved in computers, like computer visualization. So what was your motivations?
Well, like you, I've always been a fan of technology. I've always been a technophile. And any new technological innovation, I'm right there. I'm an early adopter for everything. But VR in particular was a technology that just captured my imagination. I said, we can actually create these virtual worlds, and people can spend time in them with each other, and that vision from science fiction, which actually is a very old idea, the idea of virtual worlds, can be made into a reality, and that excited me and made me passionate and wanted to pursue it.
So it sounds like an oldie but goodie story for many of us.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because when the internet first came about, or my first exposure to the internet, which was, you know, in the 90s, right around the same time, that was pretty much all the internet was a bunch of chat rooms with people getting together. It was a bunch of, like, basically like nerds, and we would sit in there, and it was just text-based. There was no images, and then AOL came out, and that was like, oh wow, now we have like HTML, and we had like other rooms that had pictures and even movies if you could wait days to download a movie or a moving picture or whatever. But yeah, so a lot of this has been driven. I think a lot of this technology has been driven by the social aspect of of the technology.
And that's interesting you should say that, because a lot of people who are not familiar with VR look at it from the outside and they think it's a very isolating experience. You're there in this headset and you're disconnected from the world, but you're actually not disconnected from the world. You're disconnected from the physical reality, but you're connecting with other people online. So it's very social, and that's a surprise that a lot of people encounter when they get into VR, how social it is and how many other people are there and engaged.
It's kind of a lot like what's going on right now with us right here. It's kind of it will take the Google Hangout kind of to the next phase. I mean, here we are, Mike's 350 miles away from me, and you're up in Canada, so you're like 1,000 miles away from him. So
more than that.
Yeah, and here we are having a conversation like we're sitting in the same room together.
Yep.
Yep, and I think that's really good. And when we did our video gaming addictions seminars, one of the things that was, and actually I started a documentary and ran out of funds, but essentially what we found out is that even though people spent a lot of time in MMORPGs, main reason for doing that is because of the relationships they had with other people, which was part of what was manipulated in the games, is that you had to get people involved to play World of Warcraft, and you had to be there at a particular time. But a lot of it was social, and so I think we're going to be seeing the same thing here. So let's kind of move on a little bit, Bernie. You are the CTO of two companies, not just one, but two, and I'm going to jump to my desktop here so that we can take a look at it. One of them is Deep Reality's Immersive Media. So we'll start with that one, and the other one is, how would you pronounce it?
Tyrium.
Tyrium, thank you.
Yeah.
So you have two of them there. So let's start with Deep Realities. What is this?
Deep Realities was founded by a woman named Jennifer Yannick a couple of years ago to explore virtual and augmented reality applications. And she was very early adopter of that technology. And we did a couple of projects. One was an industrial project, which we're unfortunately still under NDA for, but it was a good project and paid well, involving, I think I can safely say, augmented reality for equipment maintenance. And that's all I can really say about that. And then we did a project for a company called Lindt Chocolate. It's a big chocolate company, and they were doing a product launch, and they wanted a virtual experience for that on the Oculus Rift. So we did that. So I worked on a couple of things with her, and we have some more projects on the go. And it's basically a small, highly motivated startup doing virtual reality and augmented reality applications.
Very, very cool. And then your next one, let me jump back to my screen on that one, is Tyrium, Immersive Media. So what's the difference between the two?
Tyrium is focused currently on photographic capture of spaces. So they have a camera rig that lets them go in to a physical space and capture stereoscopically in 3D. And it can be used for all kinds of things. We have a proposal to do a battleship from the Second World War that's currently in dry dock, so no one can actually go on it and look at it. But we're going to go in and capture all the different compartments and the deck and so on, so people can go on a tour of this battleship without having to physically go there. It's a company that was founded by Darren Conley last year, and it's gained a lot of interest. We did another project for UNICEF Canada for showing people who donate to UNICEF where their money is going, basically. They can donate to UNICEF, and in the mail they'll get a little Google Cardboard viewer they can use to view documentaries about places like, all the trouble spots in the world. The one they're working on right now is Uganda, and it's a great way of actually putting people in that situation, seeing firsthand what the needs of the people there are, and motivating them to donate more to help the people in need.
Very, very cool. So if I understood you correctly, so they'll make a donation and you actually will send them a Google Cardboard kit so that they can follow along as so they actually have a little bit more, and just instead of static images, which
Right.
a lot of them use in the past, and instead of just video links from YouTube, you actually can allow them to be immersed in the environment that they're helping. Very,
Exactly.
very interesting. And then obviously you also do, what kind of cameras are you using with this?
It's a custom camera rig that Darren constructed. It's basically, well, for the HIDA and the Canadian Heritage Project, it's a camera that does a static 360-degree photograph. For the UNICEF project, there's a separate group doing the content creation, and they actually went over to Uganda with a rig consisting of a number of GoPro cameras in a 360-degree rig. So there are different technologies. We focus primarily on the software, particularly on the delivery platform.
Pretty cool. So is this, what do they call it? You say 3D 360, so does that provide stereo pairing as well as a 360 experience? Because
Right.
there is a difference. And
so you have a full 360-degree experience. You can look all around and see it stereoscopically.
okay, so you get that depth that normally is missing in a lot of the 360 videos out there, for instance.
Right, and we
Like
find that makes it a much more compelling experience. Like when you're watching this, you actually feel like you're right there in the room with this impoverished family and seeing how they're struggling. And it really does kind of pull at your heartstrings, and that's what we want to do. We want to let people empathize with the plight of people less fortunate. Someone once called virtual reality an empathy machine, and I think that's true. I think it is uniquely capable of generating empathy for other human beings.
And I totally agree with you. In fact, I had one individual, some podcast, say that they avoided watching one because they didn't want their heartstrings pulled. It was a New York video or VR experience that went viral for the New York Times, and he avoided watching it because he didn't want to be pulled. So that's kind of interesting that people would avoid it just because of the emotional ties to that. So let's kind of segue, because obviously you talked about using Google Cardboard here as kind of the platform. So is that how you got involved with Google Cardboard, or
essentially, yeah. I mean, I'm very much platform agnostic. I mean, I have my DK2 right here, I have my Gear VR right here, and I have my Google Cardboard right here. So I'm quite happy to develop for any platform. But if you're going to be sending something out in the mail to people to watch a video, this folds up a lot better than either of these two. So it's a lot easier to give people that very low cost, easy access to a virtual reality experience, and it's cheap enough that you can literally just send them out to anyone who donates.
And totally agree with you. And obviously, the New York Times did that. I think they still sent out over 1 million. I don't know how many subscribers they have, but it was in every newspaper. So if you got the New York Times, you got one. And then AT&T, or I'm sorry, Verizon was giving out Google Cardboards identified to the movie Star Wars. So if you actually were a subscriber to Verizon, you could pick one up. So they're obviously low cost enough that people can print their own material on it, their own logos, and give them out just like flash drives and so forth. So I think that's going to be the next, what do you want to call it, free stuff at shows and so forth. But yeah, it's really cool. Now you said you're agnostic. You're also agnostic in the VR, we'll call it VR engines, but the gaming engines, the real-time engines. I know that Oculus seems to have tied themselves more with the Unreal Engine. Well, maybe that's not true. So I'm assuming you use the Unreal Engine as well as Unity and
I have to say I've mostly used Unity for a few reasons. One is it's great for cross-platform development. Like I can literally create the same app for multiple platforms very, very easily. It's a little more work with Unreal to do that. And you'll find that most of the hardware vendors are supporting Unity. They're always, from the day a piece of hardware is released, they have Unity support for it. And then later on, they'll support other platforms. So that makes me think, Unity may be the one to focus on just because it has support from all the vendors. But again, I'm agnostic. I'm willing to change platforms. In my life, I've used numerous types of engines. I can move from one to another pretty easily. But if I had to choose one right now, I'd choose Unity.
Yeah, and actually that seems to me my platform of choice. But I did some demos in the Unreal Engine, and I kind of like the look of it, but it's not as straightforward. The compiling times and the build times seem to be a lot longer, but the payoff, at least I thought, was a little bit better. But like you said, the plugins for Unity seem to come quicker, and it's supported by all the major ones right now. And they just announced, if you watched it last week, I talked about it. They talked about how Google Cardboard will have a built-in plugin, so you no longer have to continue to do that. It'll be updated within Unity itself. The Oculus is already built into it, and then now the HTC will also be built. So pretty much you just have to, I don't know if it'll be automatic or you have to select which one you use for your builds, but
it's actually automatic. I'm very impressed by that. You can build the application for, say, the Windows platform, and it'll run with either the Rift or the Live. So it's very, very flexible. And I mean, even if you wind up doing a different build, it's just a matter of changing platforms and building again. It's really that easy. So I think Unity is well named because it really does kind of unify your development across platforms.
Now, do you have an inside track with Google? I know that Google has announced, probably because Unity made their huge announcements, plus Oculus came out with, but they're going to be coming out with their own VR headset, or either just the shell or maybe actually an entire VR headset. And plus they're going to be creating a version of Android that's more specific to VR. Do you have any inside information that is a little bit more than what you're seeing on the outside, or are you under NDA?
Not really, although it's very interesting because I was giving some talks about a month ago where I said, you know, it wouldn't surprise me if Google is about to go deep into VR and expand their division and start creating a new self-contained headset. And less than a month later, they made those announcements. So a lot of people thought I had some sort of deep inside knowledge, but no, not really. It makes sense when you think
Technical
about it.
common sense, yeah. And that's kind of the conclusions I came to. In fact, I kept pushing them, prodding them with notes and so forth. Hey, you got to push on this. You can't let Samsung have everything on it. Mm-hmm. And like you said, you've got a Gear VR, and there is a pretty substantial difference in the fluidity and the frame rate. The external IMU does make a difference. There are some tricks that you can do if you've got a Samsung to improve Google. You can switch to low persistence and a few other things, but if you're not aware of them, it obviously takes a little skill. But so let's kind of move on to maybe giving us some tips. I mean, obviously you've been creating VR content for some time. What 3 things would you say for somebody who's starting out? How would they go about doing it?
The first thing I would do if you're just starting out is kind of spend some time looking at what's already out there. See what other people have done. And you learn as much from things that don't work as you do from things that do. So if you look at all the VR content that's out there, some of it is awesome. Some of it, not so much. But even looking at the not-so-great examples, at least you save the time of realizing, okay, that didn't work, so I'm not going to go down that path. You can learn a lot by looking at what other people have already done, what they've tried to do, where they succeeded, where they failed. So I think a little time spent up front, kind of researching the market and seeing where the successes and failures have been, I think is time well spent. So that's the very first thing I would do. I would also say, once you get past that point, start trying things. I mean, particularly in something like Unity, but also in Unreal, it's very easy to very quickly put together a little prototype and try it. I think a lot of people fall into the trap of speculating about, oh, this will work great, or that won't work well, and they spend so much time thinking about it instead of trying it that they never really make any progress. I think they need to just, buckle down, give it a try. If you're not sure, try it, and you'll find out for sure whether it works or not, rather than having to guess. So experiment, constantly experiment, try things. And the other...
Yep, Bernie froze. Well, so I wanted to ask him, if he comes back, I'll go ahead and ask him about what he thinks the future will be. But if he doesn't, I'll go ahead and go back to the 2 companies he's part of, which is Deep Reality's Immersive Media and Tyrium. You can find both of those in the show notes, and if he pops back in a little bit later. But until then, let's go ahead and jump into some news, Chris.
Awesome, yeah, it was another big week, week in review, Friday.
So
February
I want
19th.
to February 19th. So
It's
I'm going to go
flown
right
by, isn't
into this little video I have. This might bring back some memory of what it does for me. This is from a website called Retro. Okay. So I don't know about you, Chris.
Nee, 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 nee. What is this?
We're going to be talking about something called the Mattel ThingMaker, but
I
back in the
had one of
day,
these. This is a creepy crawlers machine.
yep. So this was the thing that you put some goop into
Yep.
these steel plates, heated them up, and then it would bake them, literally, and create rubbery type things. And
Yeah,
man,
we had
I
this.
have a blast with this.
Yeah, we had one of these.
So I'm going to segue from that into this, let's see where it's at, hands-on with the new ThingMaker. Now, imagine 21st century, we went from this thing, the goops, to this, and this is done by a
So welcome to ThingMaker.
Kids with 3D
So
or
we
something,
have
toys and
basically
so forth.
reimagined
You hear
ThingMaker,
that?
which is very iconic.
Yeah.
But now we're giving families the tools that they need to design, print, and play.
I'll turn it down a little bit more so you can hear me over the top of it. But this person went through. Now, what's interesting is Mattel has been working with Autodesk. Now, we have talked to Jesse on numerous occasions. This might be one of the reasons he's been so busy and couldn't get back on our show. But he said, remember, that there's going to be something coming out. Well, he texted me or actually emailed me, this is that thing. So they have partnered with Mattel to create the 3D print maker, which is a very small $300 3D printer. And I think that's at a price point that people can actually afford it. They are partnered with their software, and which you're seeing the actual end results. But essentially, if you're familiar with the 123D series of software, and there it is. There's the nice little unit there.
Yeah, what a awesome little machine.
Well, yeah.
Hi guys,
So
I'm
here-
back.
Hey, Bernie. So we've moved right into our news item, but I'll come back to you after this. We're talking about the Mattel ThingMaker, and we actually had and you probably would have enjoyed it. We had a little video from the past of the old ThingMaker. But essentially what we're saying is that Autodesk is providing the software, which is basically their 123D series software along with this. It's free right now, so if you wanted to get a head start. I don't remember when this will be available. I think it's later on in the year, this fall. But at $300, who can't decide to get one of these for their kids? In fact, maybe at that time I'll put out the 3D print files for the NeoDVR Junior, which is my child size VR viewer. So that
Yeah,
you
it's
can
pretty
print
cool. It
yourself.
has like all kinds of little, you can build your figurine in the software and then decide which, pieces to print in which color, so you can kind of customize your figurine, and it'll kind of help you keep track of which pieces are printed. Right now, the detail is that it prints PLA because it's not a heated bed, obviously for $300, but even then, I think it's a great way to get your hands on some 3D printing and kind of understand how it works. And
Yep, and again, pairing it with the Autodesk software is a fantastic idea. I don't have the actual website, but I'll go back to my own camera. So you'll have to bear with me. I am working on a little tiny screen, not what I have in my normal studio. So yeah, it's a really cool item. And actually, do I have it? Yeah, here we go. Okay, so I do have it. Let me jump back to that screen. Here we go. So this is an article from 3dprintingindustry.com. And so this is where I got the idea for the nostalgic ThingMaker of the past, but there it is right there. I don't know who's behind this. I have a feeling it's probably XYZ. but because if you know, Home Depot or Dremel went with a printer, I think also, I can't remember who it was from, but it was another Chinese 3D print company. So I have a feeling it looks very similar to an XYZ. It could be an independent. We'll find out more about that next week. But the big news is that they worked with Autodesk, and that kind of segues me into the next item if they have an image. Actually, they don't. But a little bit later, when we get into our VR section, Mattel had another announcement that we'll talk about. But they're wondering in this particular article if they're going to be pairing with other lines of toys from Mattel, like Barbie, and they can build Barbie accessories. I don't see why they wouldn't do that, or Hot Wheels. Imagine creating your own 3D printed Hot Wheel from designs. Yeah, so I think that's pretty cool. Obviously, it's great news for those of us who spent thousands of dollars on our 3D printers, and for a long time, printers were pretty expensive, and it wasn't until XYZ started coming out with some lower cost 3D printers that we found that it was really kind of priced out. And I think this is one of the reasons 3D System had to cancel their Cubify. They just were way too much money for what you got, and then they locked you into their filaments. I personally don't have an issue with PLA. PLAs, the materials, have come a long way, and they come in a variety of types now. And but I do find that a heated bed is still somewhat important, even with PLA. But if you notice, it is enclosed, so that's a
Yeah, the main issue with PLA, the only real issue is obviously it's low on elongation, so it's fairly brittle because it's kind of hard, like rock candy. So it's not good for things that are going to have, it's not good at impact resistance. It's not going to absorb impact like some of the other polymers.
Well, I would agree with you, Chris, other than Polymax actually has a lot of the qualities of ABS. It's a little bit more expensive, but it is a PL temperature, so, and it's probably a composite. It probably has a little bit of other chemicals.
Yeah, and I think there's companies like Eastman Kodak obviously works. They've developed a bunch of like Invent and some of these other materials that they've brought to market that are specifically for 3D printing that are, don't require necessarily a heated bed. Obviously, they perform better if you have a heated bed and you experience less warpage, but then they also, have similar properties, like you said, to ABS or some of the other, even nylon, and they're easier to print with.
Yeah, totally agree, but, again, for children, I think this is great, and one of the other
PLA is
benefits
kind of a little bit safer, and it doesn't smell, yeah.
It's fairly non-toxic, and you don't have the fumes, so I totally agree with that. All right, well, let's jump back to Bernie with my final question for him before he froze on me in the VR world. But Bernie, what do you see the future of VR? You've been around. Where do you think it's going to be next year, 5 years from now, and 10 years?
Well, that's a good question. Next year, I think we're going to start to see, and we're talking 2017, we're going to see a lot more adoption of VR. We're going to be at the point where everyone will know someone who has used a VR system. Right now, there's just a lot of awareness out there. I talk to people about VR, and they have no idea what I'm talking about, or they think it's something from 20 years ago. So I think by this time, next year even, we'll see a lot more awareness of VR out there. Your other years for, what, 2020? By 2020, I think it'll be fairly ubiquitous. I think the adoption will be very much like the early days of television. When television first started, nobody had television sets. And then one person on the block got a TV. And all their neighbors came over and watched and said, "That's really cool. I'm going to get one." And then they had their friends over, and they all said the same thing, and it kind of spread very, very quickly. I think in the course of 3 or 4 years, we're going to see VR become not as ubiquitous as television sets, but on that trajectory. And I think by 2025, they will be ubiquitous to the point where most people will have access to a VR system, a good VR system. And I think that's the key thing, a good VR system. I mean, right now, anyone with a smartphone can do VR using Google Cardboard, and that's great, and I love Google Cardboard. But a really high-end VR experience is transformative. I mean, I go to conferences, and one thing I notice is that people who are initially skeptical, they'll try it out and go, wow, and it convinces them better than any explanation could. I mean, you can sit there and talk about VR endlessly, and they're not going to get it. Put them in a really good system, and they'll get it instantly. It's like that. So I think it has the potential to, well, someone once said, VR is the final medium, right? It's not radio or television or film. Television largely replaced radio when it came to in-home entertainment. People stopped listening to old, what we consider now old radio serials on the radio and started watching television instead. Television also, to some extent, absorbed film. The internet absorbed both of those. People spend more time on the internet now watching videos than they do watching television or movies. And I think VR is a potential final medium in that people can do all of those things in VR. You can watch television programs and films and listen to radio programs if you want in VR and have this whole huge range of other experiences. So I think it is ultimately the final form of entertainment and gaming and everything else, social interaction. I think it is the future of those things.
Well, there you go. You got it from an expert and an old timer in VR. And I agree with him. I think that because of the technology, we're just going to see huge improvements, and also the content is going to improve. There's a lot of people experimenting, so I think it is the next TV and not the next 3D TV. The next TV. So let's hope that's the case. All right, I'm going to move on to my next item. And again, thank you, Bernie, for coming on, and you're welcome to chime in on my next items here. But if you remember last week, if you joined me, I kind of broke some news that maybe the company that we had on the week before, NewPro 3D, may not actually be the actual holder of the patent. And the reason I say that is that I had a guest on that I called Print Throat, who talked about some of the history that he had with the company, even years before that. So there's some concern there. So what I'm planning to do is put a roundtable discussion together either next week or the week after with some of our favorites, Brad Hill, Chris, Steve Hernandez from Creative Workshop, who kind of identifies that they possibly may be using his software without his permission. He is now licensing it. That's what I was told from Brad Hill. And so they may be using software that they haven't licensed as well. So a lot of this is speculative, and so we'd like to get to the roots of it, but there seems to be multiple people involved with it. And I just got some breaking news from Brad that there's another company. In fact, it's kind of weird. They're selling tickets to show this stuff. Actually, it's a show in England on 3D printing, but there's a new printer out there. Here we go. From Gizmo 3D that does the same thing. And again, that's print using DLP, continuous, and they claim at this show they're going to be printing a large glass in like an hour, which would normally take many times more than that. And as Chris can attest to, even though the Form 2 is still a good machine and it's faster than the Form 1, which is what I have, it's still a slow process to get the great resolution. So the Holy Grail is to put out something with that quality at the speed or even better performance than an FDM. And so whoever does this obviously can make a lot of money off of it. The sad thing, or the interesting thing, these are their FDM printers. The bed that they showed, if you go out, and I'll have it in the link, of their particular DLP SLA printer looks a lot like the rest of them. They're all not very finished. In fact, the Nexus 3D, which I covered from Italy, seemed to have the most polished looking machine, and I did make a point that I thought it was a render, but no, they actually have a finished model. So they seem to be further along than some of these others who are claiming to have the fastest machine or a very fast SLA, but they all seem to be at their infancy, kind of like in the first stages, and they're all trying to push for money. In this case, they're going to be going to Indiegogo. And so it'll be very interesting to keep following this and getting more information from PrintPro.
And one thing I have to add to all of these kind of recent developments in this whole fast SLA, we'll call it, is one thing I've noticed is they always are printing the same pieces, right? They're always
Exactly.
that Veroni sculpture. And then from my own experience with the couple SLA machines that I have, is SLA is great for certain geometries, and then other geometries it's terrible. And so what I've noticed is that they always are choosing that same orb that's like kind of a microstructure, and it'll be interesting to see what geometries are actually achievable on some of these machines at what speeds, because they're always printing that one orb. Well, that one orb may print really fast and really nice, but if you can't print other geometries repeatably, then what good is it? Like from a
Yeah, and that's a very good point, Chris, and it's something that my print throat told me as well, is that if you notice, they're always the same structure because they are actually self-supporting, and it's not really a good test of the performance of the machine. You know, what good is a fast machine if you can't provide prints? And the other thing that he told me, and this was very interesting, is some of the shots that were sent to me that I showed last or 2 weeks ago weren't even printed on their printer. Now, again, I don't know how true that is, and when I sent these to Steve Hernandez, he also noticed some telltale signs, I guess, his support structures and so forth. There's some signatures that he can look for, and he said it pretty much seems to be his software. Again, this is all speculative, and I'm hoping to have these people on and we can ask them these direct questions, because it's one thing to be able to create a printer, but it's another thing when you borrow or take other people's stuff and then claim that you own all the patents and you hurt other people's industries who may have worked either independently or very hard to create something. And that's what happened to Nexus 3D in Italy, is that the NewPro 3D pretty much claimed, hey, we got patents on this, and kind of squashed their either was a Kickstarter or Indiegogo. And I think that's kind of sad. So the more we can bring out on the story,
stupid and antiquated the whole patent system is, in my opinion, in my humble opinion. Yeah, I think that if these three people, rather than worrying about patents, they just worked on their technology, even collaborated, and they just focused on building and marketing these machines, rather than getting caught up in legal mumbo jumbo, they'd just all be a lot better off. So, but stealing people's software, that's another thing. So yeah, might I just jump in to our 3D and design, architecture, and engineering section here?
Sure. And then I was going to bring up really quick this item here, and then you can jump right in. And our lead-in video was a video done by Lady Gaga for the Grammy, the tribute to David Bowie, as we all know by now, has passed away. And I thought it was pretty good, but the more important thing is there's a lot of technology. There's this article at 3Ders.org who does a lot of great stuff on 3D that talks about the scanning process and what they went through in order to create it. So that's about all I'll say about it. I'll let Chris jump in with his item. So,
okay, yeah, this was a pretty cool one that popped up on my Thingiverse feed that I thought that our viewers might want to print at home for those that have a printer or know someone with a printer. I know this is on my print list for the week. This last week I actually had a chance to print one of those great Helix wind generators that our guest from a few weeks ago showed us. He designed that, so I downloaded that. That was from Umagine. But then this week's, this is cool. This is a digital sundial that requires no moving parts. All you do is put it on a jar of nuts, and you let it sit there, and it's slatted in. It's got these little slats in a way that actually make a little binary type clock. So as the sun moves, it actually changes time.
Oh, that is cool.
Yeah.
So you made one of these already?
No, it's queued up. I have some stuff that I have to print for my good friend Mike Balzer today, and then after that, I'm going to throw one of these on the machine and have this. So I figured our users would really appreciate that. I thought it was cool.
Yeah, and speaking of that, my good friend Chris is printing out the latest Loop. I call it the Loop Plus Deluxe. Actually, it's made for 6-inch phones now, so it gives you a little wider screen to work with. Again, the same great 50mm lenses that are now coated. So, and they actually make a difference. I was surprised at how much of a difference it made. So, we're still moving along. So
good glass goes a long way. You know, you can ask any photographer. You know, what makes or break breaks, you know, kind of the best shots. Photos, and it comes down to the glass, or even Apple, right? I mean, Apple within the last couple of years has really gotten into glass manufacturing their own glass, and that's kind of like one of the features of their newest Apple campus that they're building up in Cupertino. Is they're building these giant curved glass surfaces that are, I think, going to be kind of a first of their kind in the world. So glass is, yeah, good glass goes a long way.
Yeah, totally agree with you, and actually that's going to be very reasonable. I've got a good price on a large number of them. So again, the coating really works well. You know, Bernie, I'm going to try and get you one because I think you'll enjoy it. It really makes a difference. I was surprised on how much difference a large lens VR experience can provide. And so it's
Great.
one thing for me to sit here and talk about it a lot, but I'll have to get them out for people to actually see for themselves. But
Like I said earlier, you have to try it to really know what it's like.
yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the next item that I've got, and where are we at? Okay, so 3D in medicine, this is kind of cool. I actually had something earlier, but it would have been another 3D fabrication story. But I wanted to do something different because I've got a few other items from NVIDIA that I'm going to talk about. NVIDIA, as you're probably aware of, creates a lot of graphics cards. And if you're going to be getting an Oculus or an HTC, it is almost a requirement that you look at a good video card from NVIDIA. And there's a couple of things I'll talk about later, but one of the things that they did is working with the Titan GPUs is a research, let's see if it says, the Salk Institute of Biological Studies. But essentially what they were able to do is, and I'll play this little video, and actually I'm still on you. So I don't know. Yeah, so I think you can hear that a little bit, right, or no?
No, I can't hear it, but it looks like we're zooming in here to some like neurological pathways of the brain or something.
Correct, and what they did is they simulated and then ran it through these Titan cards, the process of the synapse pretty much exploding, and if you notice the synapse is off to the left here, right here, and it'll show you what happens when it actually crosses that barrier. And what they found is by simulating it, that the number of chemicals that can create different ways to encode, let's say, just data or information is about 10 times more than what they assumed to be happening. But the cool thing is that they simulated this whole thing in real time, and you're actually seeing the process take place. So I will have this in the show notes so that you can watch it yourself. There's a voiceover on it that kind of explains the whole process. But this is what they found out by simulating what the chemicals do. And they've discovered that we actually can store probably 10 times more information than we thought before. So I thought that was pretty cool and another great application of 3D visualization. Bernie, I could see this actually being a VR experience where you're immersed by your neuron.
Yeah.
Somebody may be doing it, and it's obviously, once you've got in the 3D format, it's not that difficult to create a stereo pair and actually move in that direction. Okay, so that was my first item in 3D medicine. Chris, do you want to talk about your item there real quick?
Yeah, this came from statnews.com. This popped up on my Google feed earlier.
Chris, this was the item that I wanted to talk about, so I'm glad that
okay, yeah, so they, it obviously really stood out, and you probably have seen this if you are following 3D on Google at all. Anybody out there has probably seen this because this ear in the pink goo really stood out to me. It's a great marketing picture, a petri dish with the ear in pink goo. So basically, statnews.com is covering these researchers out of Wake Forest School of Medicine in North Carolina. And basically the biggest kind of holdback for printing organs or tissue is keeping it alive. So they can't, you know, when you grow these cells in a petri dish, that's all fine and dandy, but when you want to go to implant it, a lot of it has deteriorated and died to the point where it's no longer usable. So what these Wake Forest, North Carolina School of Medicine um, researchers have discovered is a way to actually, and if you look at this image, you can actually kind of see it. They actually are leaving channels in the tissue that they're growing, and leaving them in a place where they actually would be in contact with arteries or capillaries, in line with the capillaries. So as soon as they implant it, it starts getting blood supply. And so they can actually have blood flow to keep that organ or that tissue alive. And they're having kind of a lot of success. They're claiming in the mice and rat studies, which is just kind of really gnarly to think about.
And if you remember, we did an interview with Tao from, I think that was his name, from Houston, Rice University. Remember, we talked to them. And they said the most critical thing, and this is why it may take a few years to get this done, is creating the infrastructure to provide nutrients and removing waste. And I was looking for that in this article, and it appears that they've not necessarily solved it, but have made great strides in that area. And like you said, without it, the tissue starts to decay almost immediately. And so, very cool. Thanks, Chris, for doing that. I had to make a decision between the two, and obviously all right, well, let's get right into Scanner Darkly. This will be a really quick update. We've talked about this before. There's a company called Orbic Per Se who's created this all-in-one 3D camera computer. So essentially, again, it looks like the PrimeSense type technology, but has an Android built in, if I remember, or a Linux computer. And they just did an update. They're still moving forward with it, and actually, I think it's going to be on time. So it's pretty cool. If you're not familiar with it, I think they're also doing pre-orders. They're out of Seattle, Washington. And take a look at that if that's something that's of interest to you. And then do you want to talk about yours real quick?
Yeah, so this is Cowtech Cyclop on Kickstarter.com. It's a $99 open source 3D scanner, and it actually has some pretty cool looking scans. Obviously, we've covered, there was one that we also backed, but this is all 3D printable, and then that you buy for $99 now. They had an early bird, but they're all gone. But at 99 bucks, they'll send you the webcam, the motor, the lasers, you know, and all the parts that you need other than the 3D printed parts, and then you can get up to a 0.5 millimeter scan resolution in only 2 to 8 minutes, and then it's got a pretty nice big size scan volume, and then and it's fully open source. So here they are. You can watch the video. You can head over to Kickstarter.com, and you can see some examples of replications that they've done and kind of their design. And kind of some cost comparisons to what's out there, and yeah, the Cyclop, 99 bucks, can get you a scanner, and they are set to ship in April. So shortening up those time windows on Kickstarter, I like that.
Yeah, and obviously you have to 3D print your parts, so they provide you a kit, so that probably reduces the time frame as well. Now, I'll be the devil advocate here. These type of 3D scanning type devices have some problems. One, because of the dual line laser functionality. If you remember, there was a company called Matter Inform, and then there was another company out of, I can't think of the country, say Yugoslavia, but that's not it, Slovakia. Rubicon, who kind of got in some trouble for trying to launch two and using the money to create a new version, and kind of irritated a lot of people with it. But the problem with these is that because they're optical and line of sight, there can be holes because of the occlusion process, the dual lasers. But at this cost, it's minimal. If you remember, Chris, way back when, 2013, I had given you a kit using PVC tubes that I got on eBay. That use the same thing in a small Arduino Nano, if I remember correctly. And the biggest problem is ensuring that you have good software. And I don't know, did it identify in that what kind of software they're going to be working with?
It's going to have an Arduino as the software. So one thing I've noticed with projects is if you are going to embed a project and you are going to program it and send it to someone, then the Arduino Nano is a perfect because it's got a smaller form factor. But if you're going to give it to a user to program, it's not great because the FTDI driver functionality is not as, I should say, easy to use. It doesn't have the ease of use as just like an Arduino Uno, something that's like out of the box, you plug it right into USB. So I think that project, I put that project together that you gave me, and I really appreciated it, but I could never get it working because and I think the holdup was the Arduino Nano. And also that the header pins are all, you have to solder everything, and whereas the Uno is just like, if you get something wrong, it's real easy to take it apart and put it back together. So ease of use is a big thing. So I would recommend a lot of people, for any of our listeners that are developing a project that are going to have the user be building it, an Uno would be a better way to go than the Nano.
Yeah. Well, in this particular case, it was a guy building some, I don't even know if they included, I think they included the PVC pipes, but the issue with it was the software was very rough. Essentially, it used OpenCV libraries, and the technique that he used, as well as a lot of them, is that they literally take snapshots of the laser as it's rotating. So the Arduino is just used to rotate the table at a precise movement, and then you take snapshots of the laser line, and then you compile all of those together using the OpenCV library to come up with the cloud, and then finally the mesh file. And it's one of the reasons why it takes so long. But in my opinion, if you remember, we backed the company, gosh, I can't think of their names now, a few months back with their green laser version. It was also like $199, very reasonable. And so you, in my opinion, you might want to look at that. You use your iPhone with that, and I think the quality will be better. But if you want to get your hands wet and try and build things yourself, no problem in doing that either. So. Okay, so let's get right into our VR corner, and we've got a lot of things. So I'm going to run through these very, very quickly, and then since I'm up here at Occipital, I've got a special guest. I've got Phil that's going to be coming, and he's actually going to be giving a demo of their mixed reality things that they showed at CES and kind of talking us through that. So so let's kind of run through this really quick. One of the things I want to talk about, is this going to be that killer app for VR? And we have it's a co-op Vive shooter called Servius. Bernie, I don't know if you saw this or not, but it looks pretty neat. Essentially, you can use the Vive hand sticks as different weapons, and there's a lot of control through them. So you can have a bow and arrow, you can have swords, you can have guns, and the demos they have, let's see, I'll bring it up right here, is kind of cool. I think this looks a lot like an Unreal Engine here. But the fun thing is, notice there's multiple players, so you actually can play with multiple people in a cooperative, and they don't even necessarily have to be in the same room. Actually, I don't know if you can run multiple VRs in the same light towers. Can you, Bernie? Do you know?
You can, in principle, you can have a number of controllers being tracked. Because if you're talking about the Vive specifically, then you can have any number of sensors in the room as long as they're visible from at least one of the transmitters. It's kind of the inverse of the Oculus Rift. Instead of having a camera looking at you, you have light from the transmitter. As long as your sensor can see that light, you're good to go.
And so you would only need 2 light towers with multiple people, or do you have to have dependent? Okay. So they would
that's
just
how they do the head and both hands, right? So they're tracking, right there, they're tracking 3 things with the 2 light towers.
So very cool. So the neat thing about it is because you have your cooperative functionality, and then you have this very sophisticated way of using these hand wands to pick out different weapons. So I think that's going to be kind of a cool direction. The the visuals look a lot like Unreal Tournament. I don't know if you remember that in its day.
Mhm.
I was a big Unreal Tournament player at some time. So I think this is going to be kind of similar to that. So we'll see what happens with that. I thought that was kind of cool. And then on to our next item. I found this, and I don't know. HTC, or excuse me, Oculus works a lot with Samsung, so they may have an actual OLED from Samsung. But I found this EDO. They make specifically that size VR viewer, which is a 3.5 inch, but more importantly, it's a 1080 by 1200. So in my own research, I was looking for something else, and I stumbled upon this, and I'm thinking that is exactly the size. And if you read the specs, both the Oculus and the HTC Vive use dual screens now, and so that's a possibility. These are low persistent. They're AMO LEDs, which means they're active matrix, so they have a very fast response time. So this could be possibly what's in the HTC Vive. I'm not sure if that's what's going to be used in the Oculus. The date for the Oculus is supposed to be sooner than what they say their mass production ship date is. So maybe Samsung has something similar to that. Now, my caveat behind having two displays, if you've ever worked with organic LED, they have a tendency over time to change in the color gamut. So how, I know you can control that in the drivers and the algorithms for a single screen, but how do you do that with two screens? So I see some issues over time that you could have one screen maybe bluer or less blue, so there'll be some type of calibration, or you just buy a new one in a couple of years. I don't know. It might be like smartphones at that point. So
I think it is kind of like smartphones. I think the intent is that you would upgrade your device before that color drift was too large. Because remember, ideally, when they put these together, they'll have panels that are made at the same time, so they will change their color gamut more or less in sync with each other, and you can correct for that in software. I mean, if you know how many hours it's been running, you can go, okay, we now have to decrease the green or increase the red in order to maintain the same color selection. So I suspect they can do it in software at least over the short term, and by the time you see the limits of that approach, then people are looking at buying a new head-mounted display anyway. As to whether these are the panels or not, it's interesting because both HTC and Oculus are using the same display technology that was originally developed by Valve. And what they do is they have the two displays rotated 90 degrees. They're actually in portrait mode. And instead of using the full 1980, they're only clocking it down to 1200. So at 1200, they generate a vertical retrace. That's how they're able to get that resolution and frame rate. Because there's a limit as to how much data you can move over the bus between the GPU and the display, and so they have to, in order to get the high frame rate and the high resolution, they have to play a few tricks, and one of them is that 1200 instead of 1920.
Well, that's some interesting news. Well, as you can see, these are specifically to the specification, and if you did put two of these together, that would make it. So it would be kind of funny to take a plate and switch it and then take away part of the resolution. That seems a little odd. But HTC does claim that the aspect ratio is better by doing that. So I have not seen it personally, so we'll see if that actually holds out. But I just thought that was interesting that this is the exact specification. And the HTC still doesn't have a release date. They're going to be taking pre-orders soon. But they're saying fall, and that's about as general as it gets. Oculus seems to have a much firmer date on when they'll be releasing theirs. So let's kind of move right into the last item is, and if you remember, we talked about this a little earlier. Oops, wrong item. Did I close it? Well, I'll just mention it, and it'll be in the show notes. There is a new headset coming out from Mattel. And I was hoping to have an image. See if I can bring it up. So it's the Viewmaster 2, and it has better optics. I have a feeling it's probably just the same as what's in the new Google Cardboard 2015. So they're let's see if I remember, the 37 millimeter lenses are in the, here we go. So here's your new headset. So it's a little different. Now the concerns I have is that they identify this as for children, but if you use the previous ViewMaster, it is bulky. It's about the heaviest viewer that I have, and I've weighed them all. It's about it's about 4 times heavier than cardboard, and then about twice as heavy as my Loop, and then like 4 times heavier than my NeoDVR Junior. So it's very rugged, I guess. Here's the inside. Here's the larger 37 millimeter lenses. So they pretty much have refined it to the next generation of Google Cardboard. They still have the retro switch, which is nothing more than a capacitance switch, and then a place to put the phone. Another feature that they identified with it is that it has an earphone jack, which they didn't have on the previous version. I guess people complained about that. But again, the IPD seems to be about the same as on the previous version, which is close to 65, if I remember correctly, which is more an adult IPD, not a child's, which is more like 55. And I'm wondering, again, who is this made for? And so it looks nice, but again, this will be released in the fall at the same time as the ThinkMaker. Okay, so on that note, I'm going to introduce our guest, who's been waiting patiently for me. And I apologize, guys. So let's see, my camera is pointed. I have 2 of you, and you'll have to talk closer to the mic.
How's
more
this?
direction. Oh, that should be good.
This
Can
is
you
good.
hear him? Bernie, can you hear them?
I can.
Okay.
Check 1, check 2.
So I've got Phil and
Mark.
who just joined Occipital not too long ago.
Recently back in December as a developer program manager.
Okay.
But really, let's focus on Phil, who's returned. This is what, 4th?
I guess my 3rd time.
3rd time.
Yes, he's
Three-time guest.
for those who've been watching this show on a regular basis. Phil has been here many times, and we've talked about a lot of different things. Last year in January, he showed off something they showed at CES. Which was the ability to use the occipital structure sensor as I call it, environmental awareness, not in VR, but AR, allowed them to move around with a tablet by using this sensor to kind of, in real time, map out the 3-dimensional structures. So when they moved around, that provided relative information back to the tablet so that you could pretty much see the VR, or in this case it was a tablet view of your area, and you could walk around it. And as you know, I took that and went to town with it and created a VR experience, and we showed it at AWE. So literally you can walk around in the VR environment. And even though HTC Vive and a few others, and I guess Tango has worked on something similar to that, I think we've kind of polished it even more, and it's becoming even better. But the reason that you guys are here today is at CES you launched something that was really cool, actually a couple of things. You identified that you're going to have a new software called application foundation, or SDK, called Bridge. It's going to be released soon.
Engine, yeah.
And also you're doing more mixed reality. And I'll let you guys define mixed reality, because obviously we've heard of AR, augmented reality. We've heard of virtual reality.
Yeah.
What is mixed reality? So whoever wants to talk about it.
What do you think?
Mixed reality is just more convincing augmented reality, and frankly, it's not such a scary word as augmented reality. I think some people are put off by that word.
I think what we're doing is different in that I think when you hear augmented reality, you tend to think of, like an IKEA catalog that has 3D models in it or something, and that's cool, but it's very static and not really interactive generally. And with mixed reality, what we're really trying to do is make it so the little things that happen in real life that you expect, that your brain expects to see, also happen in these, AR, VR situations. So like stuff like shadows, stuff like motion blur, like just things like that make it much more convincing, and also having characters that and items that move around in these augmented reality type spaces that actually interact with the real world in very convincing ways.
And you can interact with them because it's as if it was a part of your world, your environment.
I think that's the big difference between when we say mixed reality and augmented reality is we're really blending them. We're not just laying one on top of the other.
Right.
Yeah, and I had it here, and let me pull it up real quick, but go ahead and keep talking about it, and what we'll do is we're going to kind of move the camera a little bit off to the side here. You've created a little stage for us to set up. So
yeah, how's that look?
Let's see.
How's that?
Okay, I think we can. There we go. So essentially, you've created a stage here to kind of set up the environment so that the structure sensor can map the 3D perspectives of it. I'm assuming there needs to be some physical cues that help with the overlay, right?
Yeah, currently we get a little bit of knowledge of the scene using a structure sensor on the iPad, and then using the mesh data we've captured from the space, we lay out these really cool and really easy to put together interactions with different, basically any kind of character or object you'd like. Right now, I'm just going to show a pretty quick sampling of what we already showed at CES.
Okay. And then I've got a video that I can show once I can pull it up again.
So, yeah, part of the intention to part of the reason we want to we like doing demos of this tech is that it's very there's no cheating. So as you can see here, we've got our 3D character. I don't know if you're picking it up there.
Can you?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. There you go. Let me see.
Wow.
Now I can.
To let everybody know, this is not a digital background. That is my case that I brought in there.
Yeah.
So that's not something that they staged. They just brought it over there to set up.
And so what he's doing now is giving himself a shadow that you see falls really nicely. If we could move the camera a little more, I could move around more. But like it's as you can see, it's very stable, and the only shaking is happening because of my hands.
Bring it up just.
And he can jump around and land on stuff.
Right now he's going to implement physics in our world here. So when he hits the button, his physics will now essentially match our physics. And just like hands on the ground plane, you can see. This is all the stuff we showed off at CES 2. That was also a live demo. I think we were probably the only company doing this kind of tech that did an actual live demo on the show. We can go ahead and probably cut it off for now.
Actually, show a little bit more.
So the rest,
we can still see the camera. Bring it a little bit closer to.
I don't know if this part of the demo will work very well in this scene actually, so we might have to cut it off. Yeah. You can see the rest in the video.
And actually,
I have to cut it off for now because we had issue with the wall transition this morning.
Well, and it was very impressive to see that in real time.
And the video, I think the video that you have is also will show off the same functionality. So.
But you know what? It appears it didn't get crossed over to my laptop. Do you have it on a flash that I could pop in real quick? Okay. So we'll bring it back to you. And so what? So
awesome! Thanks for that demo. That was pretty cool.
So what is the Bridge SDK or the Bridge engine? What makes it different than what you have currently for the structure sensor?
Yeah, so it's meant to play with structure sensor. We're still figuring out how it'll be delivered to developers, in its end form. But what it does, it takes care of the vision and the graphics between your 3D models you put into it and the computer vision that happens with the camera on the iPad, the iOS device. I say iOS device, technically it could work with iPhones 6 and 6S. We do support those. Yeah, I mean, it's special that when you saw Phil flash the device over the area, it recognized the area, and
it's one of the cool things about it is so basically what it does is almost instant relocalization. to whatever scene you've set it up to. So you can one thing I didn't show, which I should have, was completely, say, obscuring the structure sensor. Most demos, if that happens, you have to restart and everything's messed up. But with Bridge Engine, if you cover up the sensor, it'll do its best to try to limp along with just colored camera data. But if it can't do that, then it'll just pause. And when you take your hand off, it'll relocalize immediately and continue playing the scene.
Yeah, so you can blind it and not break it.
Yeah,
right.
It's meant to be robust. Like really, what we're targeting here is like, we want this to be so solid that a 6-year-old can't break it.
Okay. And it has to be. I mean, for different types of environments, it's environment agnostic. Let's say, say for some corner cases. But yeah, it'll work in your living room. I worked at CES where we had a chaotic environment. The lights went out, and with lighting going down, it still worked. It still maintained.
Yeah, we lost power, and I think didn't a couple of was it just our booth or was it a couple around us too?
I think it was just our booth, but it wasn't like all our power because we obviously had the ambient light from from CES, the conference hall, but the lights in our demo area went out.
That was pretty funny because usually you lose power and your demo is screwed up, but because ours was totally mobile, the only thing that kept working was the demo.
So I've got your card here, and I've got several files. Which one is the file?
Just the top level one.
This one.
Just go to the root of the drive. Should be DCI.
Okay.
Or no, wait, go back. Is it not? That's weird. I just put it in the root level. It's not showing.
No.
I can continue chatting if.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, other things that are neat about it is that when you grab your camera data and your device will recognize the depth information, you can also remove those pieces too. Now, that's what we want to enable. We want to enable bringing more than just virtual models into the environment, but seeing what of the real world we can take out and kind of make a transition in your experience, your unique experience, transition to a virtual reality. So now that you've captured data about the real world in your living room, you can cut pieces of those out, and now you're sitting on some scene of Star Wars,
or the moon, or Mars, or whatever. Yeah. Yeah. And the environmental awareness is also a big, I think, is a unique feature of Structure SDK and Bridge Engine specifically because it lets you do stuff like walk around on Mars or somewhere without being worried that you're going to fall down the stairs or trip over your couch or you're not going to like Dick Van Dyke over the ottoman or whatever. It'll let you know that stuff's there if you want it to. If you're going to create something that requires you to move a great distance or even farther than a couple feet, like I'm still not super comfortable wearing a headset and then walking around or even just like any stuff like that. It's not very useful for things that don't require you to just sit still. And because we're using the iPad and iOS, what's important to us is that we can move around. And even if you're looking at your iPad screen playing a game, you might not notice, that something's in front of you. And so we're solving that problem too.
Yeah, you want to give a window to the world rather than a block of your vision, what's in front of you.
We want to create more of a window than a door.
Yeah.
Now it's interesting. Before coming up yesterday, I stopped at Stanford. I'm working with Dr. Chu, and what they're wanting to do is with their residents through a program that they've got. They want to be able to provide them an overview before they actually hit the operating room. So they want to know where everything is at because once they get there, so they've had something in the past, but I actually looked at the demo. It's pretty flat. It was made in Unity, but they want something more dynamic. So I went there and showed them my operating room. That was both a headset.
You're still using the Hamido, or?
I have a Hamido with a special bracket, and then I have my loop that I showed them as well. I'll show you guys later on, but I have a Hamido with a new bracket for the larger 6S Plus.
Okay.
But I also showed them my tablet here with the sensor in front of it, and allowed them to move around, and they loved that.
Yeah.
So the fact is that we can go either to a VR experience or a mixed even with the headset or with a tablet gives a lot of options and a lot of power.
Yeah.
And I told them it really literally took me only a couple of minutes to make 2 different builds, one with the 2 cameras, one with 1 camera, and then a few minutes to bring it into Xcode and launch something else. So my next point that I'd like to talk about is, let me stop this.
It's our friends tested there.
Yeah, actually tested, had one of my 3D items on a couple of weeks ago too. It's kind of cool.
Nice.
Yeah, I did something called, I can't even remember the name of it, a Ducati girl. Some guy had created a full-scale Ducati, 3D printed it, called Bargain, and he was actually on there, and they had my little piece on it too. But that's besides the point. So getting back to the point, my experience as a developer is specifically for iOS. Where are you taking Bridge? Is it going to be just for iOS, or are you looking at different platforms?
I'll let Mark answer that one.
But, yeah, I think part of my role here is, I would say role. I think I like to call it my mission, really, is to have more engagement and more feedback from the developers. And we've started that. I've had regular calls with developers that are on the forums, and then reaching out to new ones that we actually meet at CES, for example. So we need to know that information, and now we have something to go by in terms of, we're hearing Unity, Android, and
lots of other things, Unreal.
Yeah, Unreal.
You always get people that want stuff, want it for everything, basically, and one of the things that Mark's been doing, especially with Bridge Engine, is like he was saying, explicitly, reaching out to developers to see, kind of test the waters and see what exactly not just what do they want, but what does it seem like they need. And we actually, I think we have a pretty cool thing we can announce here, which is that we are in fact starting the beta test of the Bridge Engine
in a couple weeks. Yeah.
In a couple weeks, it's it's invite only. But that specifically is for iOS. There'll be, we'll have more details, but I think that's about all we can say about it right now. But it will be for iOS to start with, as far as this beta goes, and we'll be starting that beta test in just a couple weeks here, and getting into the hands of some real developers.
Yeah, and through iteration, we'll know what else.
And that's not really too bad. Apple has obviously created a wide series of tablets and I'll just say smaller formats. You've got the iPod, which you can get for $160, which is a great little powerhouse, which I've used a lot, and actually designed my little VR viewer around it for the smaller items. So you've got that. Plus, they're going to be releasing the iPad 3, which is supposedly going to be powered by the same chip, the A9X, that's in the iPad Pro. You've got the iPad Pro, so if you want the deluxe dinner table carrier tray, as well as your mixed reality.
We recently released a bracket for iPad Pro for structure sensor. Sadly, they have already sold out, but we will be getting more, I think, in probably a couple weeks.
And what's the price on that?
Jeez, I don't even know off the top of my head.
I think they're about $30 for the previous one.
No, it's more expensive than
I would
the
think
previous
so.
brackets now. But
more plastic.
It's just well, it's actually a totally new design than our old brackets. We rethought how we build them. Because it's just such a big, it's just a completely different thing than the regular non-pro sized iPad.
So is it out on your website?
Yeah. Okay. If you go to store.structure.io, you can see what it looks like. And there's also, we updated our getting started guide to, if people need to help with assembly or anything like that. So
it was good to know that there are iPad Pros out there using the sensor.
Yeah, I think we sold out of our initial stock in like a week and a half, 2 weeks or something. So we definitely have more coming.
Okay. Well, so good way of doing it. So essentially, you saved on some plastic and just made it kind of overlap the top as well as the side there.
And less chance of kind of getting out of whack with the
So the
aligning
way,
and calibration.
so this is very different than the way any of our other brackets work right now. So instead of using our standard aluminum latch on the side, what we're using are adhesive pads, removable adhesive pads, to attach the kind of the plate of the bracket on there, and then you put a very small sliding removable piece on the back of your structure sensor, and you can slide it in and out of the back of the iPad Pro without screwing up your your calibration or anything like that. So it's a it's a pretty rigid system, but it's just a totally new totally new design.
Yeah, we had one of our good kind of advocates, good users, Mark Kolpak.
Yeah.
Worked on visual effects for the Shield.
Yeah.
Not the Shield. Shield. Agents of Shield.
Agents of Shield.
And he tweeted out him scanning. He uses it for visual effects and taking those models he scans.
Previs for VFX and location stuff and all that kind of fun stuff that you can do with the structure sensor for VFX.
Yeah, it's interesting. The structure sensor can be used kind of pre-production, and then for developing that content for VR, AR, can be used on that end also.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty cool. Well, you guys know that I have something called Bare Essentials, right?
Bare Essentials. Oh yeah.
Just like strip poker.
Yeah. No, he's got the.
What is this?
This is.
You'll see a little bit later.
Yeah. It's Mike's special.
Yeah.
Special platform.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I also have a new one, version 2, that can convert any of your brackets to removable. Essentially, it's a steel plate that I can show you later on as well. So another question I have, and I'm going to bounce to it. The last few brackets you have this special adapter for, I know it's a wide-angle lens. We've talked about it before. Where is that lens? It's been a year now, guys.
No comment. No comment currently.
Okay.
Possibly not no comment for much longer, though.
Okay. Well, and we have talked about it before.
We've used it in public before. It's not exactly a secret, but no comment.
Well, and just to let our audience know, the purpose of that is that it provides a wider field of view for the camera, which is used in conjunction with the sensor, and it helps stabilize the capturing process and for the mixed reality in VR.
Yeah.
And so hopefully that will be out soon, because that can improve the, not necessarily performance, but the accuracy and the stability of the scan process. But that's what that's for. So if you're wondering...
Basically, computer vision likes the widest FOV you can get,
Better awareness through the camera.
Yeah.
And it also can be used for other lenses. There's a company out there, and I've actually got a set, so I got a telephoto that uses that same bayonet.
Oh, the same bayonet connector?
So if you're interested in that, I can send you a link out to those.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to check that out. It's pretty cool.
I have them with me. I carry everything. Okay, well, on that note, we've got a couple more items to finish up, and then I guess we'll move on to other things later on with Occipital. But thank you, guys. I appreciate it, and love the live demo. So it wasn't just a mock-up, people. This thing actually exists, and it's really, really cool.
Yeah.
And, I've talked about it before. You've got Microsoft with their HoloLens, and they've done a lot of demos with it. And then they talked about the developer price of being like $3,500, which is somewhat pricey.
It's pretty.
And I mean, it's cool looking, but then a lot of people have complained that it's like a really narrow slit in front of you, and it kind of ruins the effect. And after we just showed this demo here, which is very similar. In fact, I've heard that they're just really starting now to work on occlusion. And the other one out there that you guys have heard of, obviously, is Magic Leap. A couple weeks ago, I went through the technology on that. If they can pull it off, they've got a lot of money now. That is going to be awesome.
I think they're going to need it for everything that they're saying that they can do.
Yes. Yeah, and if you go through the patents on it, you can see that it's going to be a very sophisticated, very complicated process.
Yeah, it seems like it.
But remember, DLP projectors, they said the same thing with all those little tiny mirrors.
Yeah,
so who knows? Okay, well, thank you, guys. And back to you, Chris. The Print Whisperer's got something for us.
That's right, yeah. So I know we've talked about this, we've touched on this briefly about how you can improve your performance of your printer by keeping it enclosed. But this one, I do like the safety tips. So today I want to talk frankly about VOCs, just to touch on VOCs. VOCs are volatile organic compounds, and they're found in all kinds of household chemicals, you know, in commercial products, and we're constantly being bombarded by VOCs, and so VOCs are super dangerous. We're finding out, you know, now, and they're not. Many of them are not necessarily acutely toxic, but they you might not show symptoms for a long while, but when over long-term exposure, VOCs build up on your liver and your other vital organs, and they decrease your immune function. They can cause cancer. So they're nasty. They're nasty. So VOCs. So we're being bombarded by VOCs constantly, and with 3D printers, VOCs we're also being bombarded in our workplace, our offices, our living spaces, because we're essentially melting plastic, and there's VOCs in the plastic. So how do you limit your exposure? Well, there's a few ways to do it. One would obviously be to filter your air. So you need to be filtering your air somehow, whether it's a HEPA air purifier, some filtration mechanism. There are some other options out there for you, and I'll just share a couple that I know and that I've started using. This one, I have one of these on the way for my Taz. This is made by a company called 3dprintclean.com or 3D Print Clean. I've mentioned them before. They're shipping late, so I was supposed to have mine, I think, at the end of January or right about this time. And they told me that it's supposed to come at the end of March now. So I'm still waiting for mine, but it has a scrubber built in. So it's got this actual filtration that not only is scrubbing the air going in and recirculating the air, but it's also keeping your air separate from the actual air that's in the printer. So that's also scrubbing your air. The other one that I've been doing quite a bit of research, and I have another one of these on the way. Is a hydroxyl generator, similar to an ozonator. This is a newer technology that's been being used in industrial applications for about the last 7 or 8 years. And hydroxyl is essentially, this uses a special UV lamp that actually creates what's basically, it separates water molecules in the air into OH molecules, and it oxidizes. This is a non-toxic. It's basically accomplishes the same thing as ozone. So you've probably heard of ozone. Ozone is an O3 molecule. It's the same stuff that's found in the ozone, the upper parts of our atmosphere, and it kind of. So ozone, you've seen ozone generators before, and they've been using those for water purification for many years now, and also for air purification, like the Sharper Image air purifiers and that. But the problem with ozone is it's toxic to breathe in high concentration, whereas hydroxyl is not. And so hydroxyl is being shown now in commercial applications to neutralize, it oxidizes VOCs, volatile organic compounds. It actually will help neutralize them. So these run about $800, and you can mount them on a wall in your office space or your house somewhere near, and it'll do about I think about a 500 square foot per unit space. So I would recommend something like this to help neutralize VOCs, to limit your exposure so that you are, staying safe. So that's my Print Whisperer tip of the day, is go check out hydroxyl generators. Check out a way to enclose your machine because you need to be breathing healthier air.
Totally agree with you. And I've made some comments to you in the past about, man, you're such a healthy guy, but you've got all that ABS printing around you. So
I know.
There's something to do about it.
It is something I'm constantly thinking about. So I'm also getting hoods put in above wherever my prints are to kind of fume them out. Unfortunately, that's not doing a whole lot of good because that's pumping it out into the environment, which I'm not really stoked on. So filtering and scrubbing the air before you put it out or breathe it is a great way to go.
Well, thank you, Chris, and I agree with you. And so, yeah, actually, I need to do something with all the painting I'm doing. I'm not
Sure.
doing myself any. Even though I've got one of those little do you want to call it, print boxes. The filter's probably clogged by now, and
yeah, make sure your fume hood is definitely clean. You're cleaning it, you're maintaining it. Yeah, because the air you breathe, I mean, they say, it goes air, water, food. Air is the one that everybody takes for granted, but you can't go 7 minutes without air. You can't go, 7 hours without water, and you can't go 7 days without food. So air is the most important thing that you need.
Okay, well, let's move right on to our calendar, because I think that about covers it for today, and then we'll call it quits. It's already 11:14. I apologize for those of you who wanted to be in on at 9 o'clock, but sadly, it took a little while to get set up here. So, well, I'm glad that I did. That was pretty awesome, that demo from Occipital.
Sure was.
So you can go out to structure.io and order one yourself. I think they're about $300 out without a bracket. I provide brackets as well, just hint. As you know, I've been following them strongly over the last couple of years and build my own series of stuff for it. So let's go on to, where are we at? Yes, our schedule. What do we got going on in our schedule? What month is it? Still February, right? So it looks like we got a lot of things outside the country. Did the SolidWorks things already occur, Chris?
Yeah, SolidWorks World happened, and let's see, what else do we have that's a SolidWorks? And then we had the manufacturing show last week, that hence the reason I was gone, and that's always just a big show, a lot going on there. There was quite a few things, and then we also had the Aero Def show last week. And Mark Forged was demoing their new Mark II, but I did not make it. So, but I'm going to hopefully go check that thing out in the next month or so.
Yeah, and if you're not familiar with it, that is actually a really robust industrial, I wouldn't say class, but it's a very rugged type printer, if I remember correctly. I got an opportunity to see their previous version when I was at MedX. They're trying to move into the, what do you want to call it, the not biochemical, but the print fabrication in medicine. So kudos to them on that. So I'm looking at the calendar now, and we've got something in Germany, and then something in the Netherlands and China. There is a couple, I think there's a show next week in VR, but I can't remember, and I'm going to do a better job of making sure I've got VR stuff identified as well on the calendar. And one thing I wanted to bring up, because you were actually at that manufacturing conference, but it appears that SolidWorks had an announcement that they have a kid application now, or children's or young older child application. Did you hear about that, Chris? So how about next week you take a look at it and we'll bring it up again. But it looks like they've got their own apps. I think they're looking at, like what Autodesk has been doing with their series of applications. And they have announced their own announcement. They had this cute little video that I showed a couple weeks ago. So yeah, why don't you take a look at that and maybe add something to it. Again, I was hoping that they would offer a subscription-based application like Autodesk is doing, but I guess that hasn't happened yet.
Awesome.
Okay, well, Chris, why don't you sign us off? And again,
all right, everybody. Thanks so much to our special guests that came, Bernie, and then obviously the Occipital guys. We had a action-packed week, and we will see you next Friday on All Things 3D.
Bye, everyone. Phil, say goodbye.
Bye, Phil.
All right. Bye.
Bye.